There are growing calls for the Trump administration to develop strategies to protect future U.S. telecommunications systems from foreign interference. The Secure 5G and Beyond Act cites the growing influence of Chinese tech giant Huawei and says that the company's role as a leading supplier of 5G technology could be used by China to spy on foreign citizens, businesses, and governments. The bill has bipartisan support in both the House and Senate and comes after the Trump administration announced that it would require U.S. companies to receive federal approval before selling to Huawei. Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is the lead sponsor of that bill and is here to discuss it first on CBSN. She is a Democrat representing Virginia's 7th Congressional District and joins me now from Capitol Hill. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on.
So the Washington Post is reporting that the founder of Huawei says that, quote, conflict with the United States is inevitable. What is your reaction to that? And regarding your bill, what are the specific security concerns you have about allowing Huawei to integrate their 5G technology into U.S. infrastructure?
So what we've been seeing since I arrived on the Hill, I was just elected in November, I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we have been talking about the concerns related to the infrastructure of 5G technology and the dominance at this point of the Chinese firm Huawei. There are significant concerns that this could potentially impact U.S. consumers, significant concerns due to Huawei's coordination with the Chinese military and Chinese intelligence services. So the real goal of this bill, which is a bipartisan bill, is to address that concern. It's an example of Congress really identifying a threat, identifying a problem, and seeking to solve it. So this bill would require that the president lay out a unclassified plan to address the growing concerns related to 5G technology. It isn't limited or specific to a country, but it does say that as this technology continues to emerge, we need a plan for how it is that we can ensure that our consumers are safe, how it is that we can engage with our ally and partners to make sure that they can protect the security of the data that may be transmitted across this network, and really also look forward beyond 5G. What's the next frontier for data sharing and information sharing to make sure that we are protecting ourselves from potential hacking and protect potential espionage.
How urgent a problem do you think this could be?
I'm a former intelligence officer. I was a case officer with the CIA. So to me, the urgency related to anything in the realm of counterintelligence is immediate. But I think in reality, we are addressing a growing concern, and we're making a plan. In this case, we're being proactive. I don't think we have much time to delay, but I am pleased at where we are right now moving forward.
Well, what allowances does your plan make for U.S. companies who are working on 5G technology?
So the purpose here is to make sure that our U.S. technologies can develop in a place where they're not threatened by the threat of espionage as it exists due to the potential dominance of one particular supplier within one particular country due to the engagement that they may have with their domestic intelligence services. And so this is really allowing for United States companies to compete. It's making sure that we're keeping U.S. consumers safe and that we're in the global economy able to ensure that when our companies are taking real precautions to protect the American consumer, that we have that expectation across the board with products that are being produced globally. Excuse me.
And if this is a race, though, to develop this technology, how do you see the U.S. position right now? Is the U.S. well behind where China is on 5G?
Yeah, from a technological standpoint, we need to continue to be aggressive. I think we are facing a place where we might be outdone. And I think that, within the technological space, we have many competitors who want to catch up and ultimately surpass. But I think what's really important to even having that conversation is recognizing that one of the impetus for real engagement on behalf of U.S. firms is the fact that in doing so, in creating technology and being a competitor to other options, and we're frequently talking about the Chinese option and Huawei development, is that we're also helping to safeguard the American consumer and that we are providing an alternative where the same risks do not exist. And so I hope that when technological firms here domestically are looking at the state of play, that they'll recognize that this bill is meant to make sure that there's a level playing ground and that there's certain expectations, and that the president, the administration, and the greater government have a strong expectation that we develop these technologies in a place where we have every expectation that the consumer's data is protected and secure.
Well, the Trump administration Monday eased a ban on Huawei's ability to purchase U.S.-made products. What's your reaction to that?
So my reaction to that is I think it's incredibly important that we safeguard U.S. government information, and that I'm pleased that there's an identification of the fact that Huawei does present a threat to U.S. technology, U.S. information, and I think it's incredibly important that we recognize every threat that may present itself and keep U.S. government information first and foremost off of any unsecured networks.
Before we let you go, I want to ask you about some of the day's other headlines. Speaker Pelosi will hold a meeting Wednesday morning to discuss whether or not to move forward with impeachment proceedings against the president. Where do you stand on that?
So I was notably involved in hearings myself focused on Russia and other threats in the Foreign Affairs Committee. I am aware that Mr. McGahn did not arrive at the Judiciary Committee for the expected hearings this morning. I find that deeply, deeply troubling, and I think once again we see that there's a challenge that the administration is posing in terms of putting administration officials in front of Congress for our oversight role. Notably on the Foreign Affairs Committee and on the Agriculture Committee, which I serve on, we have had administration officials come before us quite regularly. So I do find it deeply troubling that when it comes to anything related to the president, that those officials are actually not arriving at Congress and not allowing us to do our oversight.
So do you support opening an impeachment inquiry?
I haven't yet made a determination on that. I haven't yet had the opportunity to confer with my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee to determine what it is that their assessment has been so far, what the back and forth may be. But I'm looking forward to a readout from some of my colleagues and from the chairman of that committee in the coming days.
How concerned are you that given the political landscape there, it may be difficult to get things like your legislation done in an environment where there has been talk in your party of impeachment?
Yeah, well, I think this bill is actually a great example of Congress stepping away from some of the more partisan, heightened discussions, more of the emotional discussions, and really focused on addressing the needs of the American people. I think this bill is a great example. I've also been a co-sponsor of other pieces of bipartisan legislation. There's a real need and a real desire among many members of Congress to get stuff done, to protect the American people, to deliver for our constituents. This bill is, we're introducing it with 3 Republican co-sponsors and 3 Democratic co-sponsors, so it is bipartisan from the get-go. The companion bill on the Senate side is the exact same thing. It is wholly bipartisan. So ideally, this is a great example of where it is that we can make real strides forward. I was just at a press conference last week for another bill, the TAPS Act, introduced by Congressman Babin. And that bill would work to identify and provide resources throughout our communities to help address threats within our communities and address gun violence and prevention. And that's also a bipartisan bill. So there's a lot of great bipartisan work happening in Congress that does, in today's environment, frequently get a little bit less notoriety. But I do think that it's important that as we're moving forward, we are making real progress on some legislation that will be impactful to the American people, to safeguarding our communication systems, to safeguarding the information of the American consumer, and really creating a strong playing field for U.S. corporations.
On the foreign policy front, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan were on Capitol Hill today to brief lawmakers on the ongoing situation in Iran. What are your takeaways from that?
So I did attend that classified briefing, and I remain as concerned as I was going into it that there seems to be a lack of strategy related to our engagement and our tactics that we are using relative to Iran. I think it's incredibly important that we have a strong strategy for what it is that we want to see in that region, and I remain hopeful that we'll get to the place where we feel that, in fact, there is a better, stronger strategy meant to keep the American people safe and meant to mitigate the threat of a nuclear Iran.
Well, what specific steps do you think should be taken regarding Iran?
Regarding Iran, I think that from soup to nuts, we need to have a strategy for what we're doing. I think we need to make sure that we are agreeing upon the fact that our first and top priority is to keep the American people safe, to protect the homeland. And from there, in order to achieve that, our goal is really to have a non-nuclear Iran. That is, of course, something that was achieved and on the pathway towards achievement with the JCPOA, which the administration decided to walk away from. According to IAEA assessments, Iran is still keeping up with its part of the bargain. There will be another review forward in May to determine if that continues to be the case. So I think that what we need to be doing is recognizing what is the strategy. There seems to be this growing provocation and growing level of conflict, and that I find to be incredibly worrisome. And as a member of Congress with the constitutional authority over the war-making powers, I want to make sure that we as members of Congress are fully understanding the positioning that the United States is endeavoring to put itself in, because I do find this to be very troubling. I've previously worked Iranian issues when I was an intelligence officer, and I really think that to keep the American people safe, we need to have a top priority be a non-nuclear Iran, but we need to lessen some of these tensions that we see amping up.
All right, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, you've been really generous with your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.